Hello, Rochester. It's Al Keeney again at the General Convention on the ninth day of the convention. I'm sitting with our diocesan bishop, Bishop Prince Singh, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on here in the recent days. But good morning, Bishop Singh.
Morning.
Nice to have you here for a few minutes to talk to everyone back in Rochester.
It's good to talk to the Saints of Rochester.
Well, tell us a little bit about what's been going on. I mean, this is the ninth day, and I imagine that there's been a whole lot going on. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've been busy like everybody else, and quite tired like everybody else. But I'm also very excited about where we are and where we are going as a church. I believe we have done some good work in worship, in prayer. Reflecting in small groups and committees, and then in informal groups. We have met in legislative sessions and have had joint conversations, both houses together on the budget. So it's been a pretty broad spectrum of issues that have been on the table. But overall, I'm very pleased about where we are and where we are going. As a church, knowing quite clearly that the local congregation is ultimately the engine that's going to drive us into some places of possibility for mission and ministry in this world, in this changing world.
One of the things that I'm reflecting on is some of the couple of resolutions that came before the House and before the House of Bishops that have made most news recently, and one is DO 25, which affirms what our canons actually say are the full inclusion of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people within the ordination process, and is also has an affirmation of our being part of the Anglican Communion. And then yesterday, the House of Bishops approved CO 56, which is to allow further study into the possible development of liturgical rites for same-gender blessings.
Right.
Would you like to comment on those?
Sure. Both those resolutions were really omnibus resolutions that put together, I think wisely, a whole lot of other resolutions that were floating around, and through a process of discernment with committees both in the House of Bishops as well as in the House of Deputies, they were able to glean some of those resolutions so that we just didn't have a whole lot of them, one after the other, speaking substantively to the same thing. And I think the same thing there was that we were trying to do what the church needs to do constantly, which is to go back to our fundamentals. And that's what we were doing. We were primarily clarifying for ourselves and for the world that this is an all-inclusive church already. And our canons very clearly hold us to that responsibility as well as privilege, so that the resolution that you referred to as DO 25, which is primarily about clarifying the fact that our canons clearly keep us as an all-inclusive church. And so the clarification to BO 33 from the previous convention was that we were going back to our canons to clarify for ourselves and for the world, just with no sense of ambiguity to it, that we were indeed a church that was all-inclusive. So I think it was the church at its best in its capacity to deal with something that was brought out at the last minute at the last convention, and caused quite a bit of anxiety, as well as I think some trepidation within our own sense of identity, that we were departing from our canons. And so this resolution DO25, as you referred to it, was an invitation back to where we already were, in a sense, in substance, and as the canons articulated very clearly. And the other resolution yesterday, CO26, which is a substitute resolution really that was passed in the House of Bishops, was also to keep the conversation in an organic way moving forward, so that we are not jumping to legislation as much as to be open pastorally. And pastoral generosity is the wording that was used to help clarify what already is. So it really is a call to continue pastoral generosity, especially in places where marriage is a civil right now. There are about 6 states in the U.S. which already have that. So there was some very rich conversation, and I would say that the House of Bishops at least was pretty cognizant about moving towards conversation that was less polarizing at the end of the day. And I think the roll call vote yesterday, for instance, was a pretty good indication that we are moving in that direction. And I hope that we can really model that more and more, because we need to be a church that helps demonstrate how to be a non-polarizing body, even while dealing with difficult issues, controversial issues, and issues that affect our congregations at the end of the day. But to be able to deal with those difficult issues in non-polarizing ways is very important as a beloved community.
Well, you've certainly had a grand initiation into your first year
Yes.
at the General Convention.
That's true.
And I appreciate your taking time in your busy schedule, because I know you're back in a legislative session very soon to talk to all of the folks back in Rochester.
Yes,
And I hope they give you a T-shirt that says, "I survived my first General Convention."
I believe I've earned the T-shirt.
I believe you have. Thanks so much, Bishop.
Thank you. Be well, beloved of Rochester, and we look forward to having more conversation, and more importantly, doing mission and ministry together. Be well.